Cool. Well, I'm tempted to get started. Does that sound like a good idea? I've been given no instructions apart from be here at 1 o'clock and and start talking. So I'm here at 1 o'clock and I'll start talking, I guess. Hi everyone. My name is Dan Laws. I am the co-founder and chairman of Youth Politics UK. I'm also a student at London School of Economics. I'm an activist from Manchester and do a lot of work with young people and youth engagement and political participation. And I'm going to tell you a bit of my story, but more importantly about how you, through your position, act as a key facilitator through engaging young people. I'm going to really focus on some really practical steps that you can do because I'm very aware that, I hope that most people are here with the intention that they want to engage young people. They know why youth engagement is so important. We're going to run through, a few of the fundamentals there, but I want to get to the really, key elements of how we as a collective can engage young people through sort of your current positions. And throughout, I'd love to hear your opinions too of practices that you've done that work. I'm very much learning here as well. But yeah, so I hope that you get a lot out of the session. And yeah, please do. We're going to have a Q&A at the end as well, where you can throw any questions from the session, but also throw any ideas that you have across. And thank you so much, the NALC, for inviting me along. I've done some work with Justin and the team at the NALC, making sure that we could try and get more young people to stand as councillors, which I hope everyone here is a big fan of doing. And we've got to try and make sure we put the structures in place that young people can do that, because I think that young people have so much to offer, and it's about getting them to stand. So that's going to be the fundamentals of what we're doing. But just to kick start us off, a little bit about sort of my journey. So I'm currently 20. I'm currently a student at LSE. And when I was about 16, the EU referendum occurred. And that was sort of the big catalyst for me to start getting involved in the political process. I was really frustrated. And look, it wasn't necessarily just at the result, although, as you'll all know, young people were entire, majority is a demographic. But it was more at the frustration. I walked into sixth form college. And there was a sense of hopelessness, a sense of helplessness at sort of the result of what happened. And that really got to me, actually. It wasn't necessarily a frustration at the result itself, it was more frustration that young people felt that they couldn't influence one of the big fundamental decisions of their lifetime. And for me, that really struck a chord. I thought, young people need to have been able to have an ability and the confidence and the sense in a democracy that you can influence change. And for me, that was a big deal. So I gathered together back up in Manchester, where I'm from, losing the accent every day, sadly, here in London. But I gathered together 11 of my close friends who I've known since sort of through different networks, through debating, sort of public speaking, from youth centres, people I knew were engaged in democracy. And I thought, okay, why don't we come together and try and do something a little bit different? Try and create sort of a youth, sort of a grassroots movement to get young people from across the Northwest involved. Because the Northwest, young people in the Northwest have sort of the barriers, not only just being young people, but, away from the centralised state of our democracy. It's more difficult to engage with Westminster, for example. And what we really wanted to do was give young people the confidence and, more importantly, sort of as important, the skills needed to engage in democracy. Okay, so we really wanted to democratize the skills needed to sort of engage in democracy, whether that's sort of public speaking and confidence and debating and policy making, and bridge the gap between policymakers and young people. So we did something which hadn't really been done, much up north. We had sort of at the start we had 11 young people going across youth centres and going across schools, talking about the importance of getting involved in politics. And we soon realized that there was a huge momentum behind this, that, we did this from a complete non-partisan point of view. We were completely youth-led. And all of a sudden, we started to get more and more attention, to the extent we'd have young people coming up after assembly saying, how can we get involved? We had young people starting to stand as youth members of parliament. We had young people wanting to go become councillors. And we thought, we're doing something different here. It's young people stepping up and telling young people why we as a demographic need to engage in democracy. And is often Dan in a bomber jacket standing in front of young people across Manchester saying, look, this is why we need to engage. And suddenly, we thought there's something in this. And the moment we realized we need to turn this into something special was, on a Saturday morning, it was snowing, I remember, and we had a budget of absolutely nothing. And we decided to do a crazy idea of holding a conference, just like the ALC organizers have done today. And we didn't have a clue what to do. And we spent 3 months on it. And that day, we had 500 young people show up with keynote speakers, Andy Burnham, we had Alice Campbell, we had Channel 4 News show up. We had councillors, we had MPs, and that was on a budget of nothing. And I remember turning around to my team and saying, everyone, there's something in this. There's something in this. So we decided to formally turn it into an organization, a non-profit organization led by young people for young people, based in Manchester, called Youth Politics UK. And fundamentally, we're a youth-led organization, completely run by young people up in Manchester. We've now expanded to London with lots of work going in Edinburgh too, trying to bridge the gap between young people and policymakers. We're completely non-partisan. We work with cross parties to make sure that we can incorporate young people's views in the policymaking process. And we've got sort of 4 fundamentals to the organization, 4 pillars. We're trying to engage young people. We try and get out there. We try and talk to them. That moment of engagement we're going to talk about a bit later, about how to reach to young people. Young people are often misconceived as being hard to reach. It's not hard to reach. It's just finding meaningful ways to engage them, educate them in sort of collectively in sort of policy making and political processes, both on a local and on a national level. And then we organise events in a debate capacity where young people can sort of exchange ideas. We're very, very adamant that we are non-partisan, so we try and incorporate as many people's views as possible in and make them feel really safe to be able to debate ideas, whether you're a Thatcherite, whether you're a Corbynite. It's just important that we can discuss ideas in a safe way. And then we campaign on issues regarding, not on partisan issues, but on issues relating to political participation. So looking at the likes of Lord Bird's current bill, trying to make long-termism, an aspect of everyday policy, taking young people's views into account. So yeah, this is us. We did really well in our first year. We won a National Democracy Award by the Cabinet Office, which is incredible. And yeah, we've just grown from strength to strength. So I'm here today, and I'm now moved over to the board. And we've got a completely youth-led team now between the ages of 15 and 18 running the exec committee. So we've got over 45 volunteers across the country. And through that sort of work, I, as an individual, have been lucky enough to advise on sort of political participation. I'm currently an ambassador to the UK mission to the UN. That made me sound like the actual ambassador. I'm not. I'm a youth ambassador to the UK mission to the UN. I'm also on the board of trustees of Young Manchester, one of the biggest charities supporting young people in Manchester. Advise the Bank of England, BAFTA, the big I Will campaign, trying to promote youth social action. Also very fortunate enough to receive the Diana Award as well and work with them a lot on youth engagement. So what I'm going to try and do throughout this session is select the best practices that I've found through these organisations and through travelling the country with youth, looking at youth centres and councils and youth councils, to try and incorporate them into a presentation and some ideas that hopefully you can take back and use to engage as many young people as possible, and hopefully with the end goal of encouraging them to stand. So we're going to look at first effective youth engagement strategies. How can we reach out to young people? First of all, how can we reach out to young people who currently aren't engaged in the political process, both on a local and national level? Then we're going to look at how we can make sort of like meaningful youth engagement practices, not just sort of tokenism. We want to look at how can we meaningfully engage young people. And then finally, we're going to look at sort of getting young people to stand. I'm very aware we're going to try and do this sort of in a local context, something I'm massively passionate at, doing a lot of work up in Manchester. And sort of throughout, please do sort of contribute through the chat function and let us know about any practices that you've done or anything in particular that you think would be useful taking back. Cool. Let's get started then. So look, I think everyone here is here because they're passionate about getting young people to participate in the political process, but I'm going to just outline some very quick ones for those who may still be on the fence, or for you to take back if anyone does say actually what is the purpose of this. Well, first fundamental one is that it is our democratic right to be engaged in policy making. A lot of young people aren't aware of the fact that in the Convention of the Rights of the Child, it's a fundamental right of young people to be involved in the political process. It's one of the key things actually that the UK really lags behind on. Whenever they do a charter and they sort of, whenever the UNHCR sort of looks at which countries are doing best in sort of children's rights, the UK actually ranks lower than you'd expect. Actually, I think it's below the hundreds in terms of world ranking, and it lags behind massively. For sure, there's issues regarding child poverty and the rest, but they really are knocked down because of democratic engagement with young people. And we can actually take a lot of examples internationally. I won't go into that today, but it's something definitely to look at. But it's our democratic right to be engaged. And one of my main jobs is going around the country telling young people that it is our right. So let's shout out about it. Second of all, of course, is representation in key policy decisions. Young people seem to be one of the only demographics in the country where it's acceptable to legislate about young people without having their voices heard. You wouldn't do that for other demographics. So it's trying to change that narrative there too. We do have a moral commitment to citizenship, education, engagement. I often look at people from different sides of the debate, and people try and be really clever, saying, certain political philosophers don't agree with this. I haven't found a certain political philosopher who has not argued in favor of citizenship education, unless we're going very, very ancient. So this is well established. We have a moral duty as a society to promote citizenship engagement, and fingers crossed through doing so, nurturing our future leaders of this country, and actually not just future leaders, current leaders too. Young people are leading now, and we have a crucial role to support that and facilitate that. But this is the thing I keep banging on about to policymakers, is that actually, incorporating young people's voices contributes in the large run to effective policy. If you're legislating for young people in your with your local council or in your city or nationally, okay, coming up with solutions to core issues are going to affecting young people are going to be best. Those solutions are going to be best when devised by young people also. They're going to be able to identify the core issues that they have faced through personal experience, and they're going to be able to come up with strategies. And if you don't believe me, try it. People in this room might have already had experience with it. Young people are fantastic at devising strategies to the issues they face. And so actually, young people incorporating their views into policy, and I'll show you some case studies later on, actually does lead to incredibly effective policy making. So those are just 5 of many reasons of why youth engagement is just so important, and why actually in the UK we've got a lot more work to do. So let's talk about strategy. Can some people throw into, I'd be really interested to hear in the current chat, sort of current practices being done. I know we've already had a sort of a comment by Mike there, thanks Mike, about sort of current practices that are being done to engage sort of young people in their area. If anyone could throw some stuff in the chat, that'd be fantastic. And as we go on, I'll start to talk about the first one, and we'll pick up sort of people's comments there, because I'd love to sort of have a collective response and figure out what people are doing really well and what we could do with help with. Youth outreach through, youth clubs, fantastic. Well, that will probably go really nicely in sort of the first one, right? And these, like I said, I want to do some practical steps in terms of reaching out young people. One of the basic ones that people don't realize is that location is so important, right? Location, location, location. The question I get asked so much are, where are all the young people, which I find hilarious, right? Because we are about, and it just goes to show that we're not looking in the right places. We have people often say, we book these beautiful venues, these cathedrals to get young people engaged, but they never come. And sure, like young people, just like any other demographic, do love a fancy event. But actually, what you want to look for are areas and venues in your local area where young people feel safe and are already going to. And that's where you've got to step in and engage them. I'd love to use a case study here. My Life, My Say are one of the biggest youth organizations in the country, and my mentor currently is their chief exec, and they're fantastic. And they launched something called democracy cafes, which are so incredible. And I'd really encourage you to try and use that model as you go forward. They had a partnership with Starbucks nationally, which is genius, because that's where young people currently go for their coffee or their iced tea or whatever they're after, right? And what they did is they chose a location through doing so where young people feel safe. Right? They feel safe to go. They go there every day. So going there for a political chat isn't going to be seen as a massive divergence. So choosing a location where they go has been really, really successful, and actually young people have been able to express their political views in a really safe environment, and one in which they feel safe to express those views. So My Life, My Say chose Starbucks. At Youth Politics, we go into schools, we go into youth centres, we go to where the young people are at instead of making young people come to us. For sure, if we have a big conference, that's a fantastic way of inviting young people to us. But otherwise, try and find in your local area the areas where young people are going to. It might be the local Starbucks, but it might be somewhere else. Local areas are fantastic on a local level of having having spots where young people go to. And one of the biggest tragedies, obviously, the past sort of 10, 11 years is sort of the decline in youth centres. We've had over 800 closed down because of austerity measures, and that's something I've been massively vocal in speaking against. But there are still places, and I encourage you, if there aren't spaces, maybe help make them alongside young people, for young people to express their views. So first of all, location, 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 much more important than people often think. Second of all, technology, it's no secret that this is where young people are at. And I wanted to link that to where young people are because young people obviously have now a larger e-presence than ever before. So now technology is really important though, is to note why it's important and what's it important for. First of all, like we said, it's important for reaching out to young people who aren't already engaged. It's brilliant for condensed information, okay? It's not going to be fantastic for putting forward a nuanced long argument as to why your local council is doing what it's doing in the area of economic development in local town, right? It's not gonna, that's not the best way of doing it. Condensed information about local meetings, about this council has done 3 things over the course of this. Condensed information is what technology and social media is fantastic for. And the third one, it's great for demystifying the process. I'm going to talk about that a bit later in more depth, especially when it comes down to sort of encouraging young people to run. But it's great for that too. So like I said, it's no secret that social media is where young people are at. Now, I'm here to tell you, as a young person, please don't waste resources on social media platforms where young people are not on. For example, I'm really sorry to say, but Facebook is a bit out of date for us youngsters now, and so is Twitter. The great platforms to reach young people are Instagram and the new thing called TikTok. So I know that often it can be really difficult to engage in these sort of platforms, particularly if we haven't used them before. And that's why I always recommend, if you've got young people in your local area who are already engaged, they're going to be your key asset. And please, please don't neglect them. They can help you in terms of shaping the technology used. And it's fantastic to see sort of organizations do sort of takeovers with young people, where young people sort of adopt the social media and take it over and talk to young people directly through that. So please definitely do use technology, and I won't go too in depth on this, but if you do have more questions about it, please do reach out, because we've got a lot of people who can help in that respect, specifically with participation. But also look at technology beyond sort of social media. There's a fantastic organization I'd encourage you to look at called the Politics Project, and what they do is they use sort of they bridge the gap between policymakers and young people through in classrooms, zooming in high profile speakers. Okay, so there's different ways of engaging with technology, and of course youth participation goes everywhere. If you're trying to attract young people, please do think about sort of your branding, marketing. Simple stuff like color in flyers go a long way. And if you're asking questions sort of about what would young people want, please include them at the start of the conversation. Say, actually, consult them. Are these materials appealing to young people? If you saw this on social media or a leaflet, is this engaging for a young person? Please do consult them, because they will be able to tell you so many of the answers. One thing which is something I'm massively passionate about is that there's been a massive shift in youth engagement practices in recent years, and it's been sort of leading towards youth-led engagement. And this is something that the youth politics sort of catalyzed in the North, and we sort of discovered. And it's that more young people are really enthused by young people leading the way. Okay, and we sort of realized this because I was never particularly engaged when someone came from Westminster who didn't look like me, who didn't sound like me, who didn't understand what I wanted, coming in and trying to engage me in the political process. That, to me, wasn't engaging up until the age of 16. So, and as soon as we started to go into schools as young people, that suddenly it had a massive effect. And so I'd really encourage you, if there are young people who are already engaged, please spotlight them. Give them the resources, give them training, give them opportunities to engage with other young people too. And you have, as adults, we have, a crucial facilitating role in that. Youth engagement, youth-led engagement does not mean adult exclusion. Okay, adults need to be right at the core of youth-led engagement, because play a crucial role in sort of facilitating that, providing them with resources and training to do so, and logistical training. Now, there are 2 sort of case studies here I'd love to use. Shout out UK. They've recently won a massive grant from DCMS to run sort of the policy, sort of policy formation and policy advising with young people for Department of Culture, Sport and Media. And they are a group of young people, relatively young people, and they are fantastic. They are awesome. And so they're able to incorporate young people's views. They are young people working with young people to support young people through DCMS. And I think that's fantastic, and it's genius. It's youth-led organizations getting grants to support other young people. And Manchester Youth Council, very close to my heart, obviously, as a young person from Manchester, they train up young people. They have adults who are incredible behind the scenes, who act as a crucial part in training up young people in their council, who then go out as ambassadors for the council and for the youth council to act as a form of outreach. And it's a fantastic way because, as a young person, if I'm in a school and I see my local youth member of parliament speaking to me, and they're trained up, they know what they're talking about, and they're going to be innately passionate because of stuff they're talking about. They've got to that stage for a reason. That's going to have 10 times the effect of someone coming up from Westminster who sadly, who can't, relatively relate to us. So yeah, I'd really encourage you to sort of think about sort of youth-led engagement, and that's a big shift that's happened in recent years. The youth politics has been a part of. And lastly, sort of on the first sort of big topic is collaboration. Don't feel like you have to start from the beginning by yourself. If you haven't done much youth engagement work previously, there are so many resources out there. I've just spotlighted here three of the big core national bodies: UK Youth, British Youth Council, and NCS. UK Youth are they have a big, they're sort of now the hosts alongside Volunteering Matters of the I Will campaign, which I'm a senior ambassador for, which gets young people involved in social action. And we have the goal we set up by the coalition government and have Prince Charles as a patron, try to get more young people involved in social action, and standing for elections, councillor, is a big part of that. So please don't think that you have to start by yourself. If there are no local bodies, but I'd really encourage you to have a look, because there tends to be sort of youth engagement bodies locally, whether that again is the local youth council, or youth centres, and sort of youth foundations. The Young People's Foundation have a lot of different young youth foundations. Then look nationally, because there'll be incredible resources. And I know the NALC, through doing some work with them, and I'm hopefully going to do some more in the future, also have some incredible resources too. Let's have a look. Okay, fantastic. So let's just go through a few things in the chat before we move over to sort of meaningful participation. It's just incredible to see how many we've got. So many people from different areas. Here we go. So holding a meeting with each of the primary school councils, it's Danielle Frost, to talk to them about what they love, would like to see improved. That's amazing. It's possible. That's proper consultation. What I'd love to talk about is how can we engage them further than that, and we'll talk about that now. Built a £1 million youth facility, but it's not used as much as we'd like to. Okay, well, fantastic. We've got the space there. It's how can we now incorporate young people into that facility and make them, feel like that is a place that they can express their views, and that will come from hopefully collaboration with other organisations. Youth venues and cafes, brilliant. So we're really working on sort of location there. The voting system could not be designed better as part of young people. This is what I personally completely agree on this. I think that we need to I personally think PR would be a phenomenal way of making sure that young people feel their voices count. But we've got to work with what we've got currently, and try and get young people at the ballot box through first past the post. Having an Instagram account doesn't mean you're connecting with young people. It's not a build it and they will come situation. Completely agree. Not if you don't. You can't just build social media accounts and just expect the young people will come flocking. So one thing I would definitely suggest looking at is some of the big ones who are doing it well. If you look at ours, Youth Politics UK on Instagram, and if you look at My Life, My Say on Instagram, these are some of the, we're sort of the youth organisations out there. We are shaped by young people. The social media is completely run by young people, and you'll notice the different strategies that are used. My Life, My Say is fantastically. There's just lots of color. There's Instagram lives. It's constant engagement, talking about the content that matters to young people. And so, yeah, 100% agree. You can't just make it a social media account and expect people to come. It's got to be active. It's got to be engaging with young people constantly. We at the very start in our parish council run a competition for our logo. 79 young people enter through local school. You have an exhibition and they came with their families. It was a great start. Next is a youth council. This is incredible to hear. So I know that a lot of people, when I was briefed for this, are at the start of sort of trying to promote youth engagement practices within their councils. And that's fantastic to hear. And as you can tell from that, I often say we've shifted in this country between from sort of your apathy to now, with the depth and the quantity of discussions happening that affect young people, now having a situation where young people want to engage, I promise you. We just need to provide them with the structures to engage. And that's where I think we can really come in here. And should a youth council be part of a parish council or a standalone organisation? That's a fantastic question, and it completely depends on sort of the relationship you envision there and sort of the situation you're at. I definitely get in touch with the British Youth Council. They're definitely a greater expert in this than I am. But it's definitely, you can't have a youth council without having that close relationship themselves. There needs to be that relationship between accountability but also collaboration. And it would, I think, completely depend on the situation. I know youth councils who have done it both ways. I think there's been ones where they've started out joint and then become more independent. So I think it will depend on sort of the situation there. But definitely get in touch with Youth Council. Fantastic. Let's go over to meaningful engagement quickly, because I think this is super important. So participation is, in practice, right, is about three core things. There are three core elements to good participation of children and young people. First of all, it's acknowledging that it's a process, okay? It's not a one-off event. Participation is about sustained engagement of young people in the decision-making process. And it happens at multiple levels too. It's in multiple spheres and multiple levels, most frequently in an individual local level, interpersonal schooling, but also on the regional, national, and international arena. So, participation nationally occurs through ambassador schemes and the likes, but actually really meaningful youth engagement, there's massive room for it to happen on a local level. And that's what we're really trying to tap into here. And essentially it's about power, okay? It's about sharing and distribution of power from those that typically control the process, that are adults, and those that are seeking to engage young people. So we can't have a conversation, I always say to politicians, about youth participation unless you're willing to give up power to young people. That's a fundamental reality about youth participation. Are you willing to do that? If so, let's talk. That's what it's fundamentally about. Now, when you sort of learn about participation and political participation in practice, this is the thing that tends to always pop up, right? It's Roger Hart's ladder of participation, and I'm going to say absolutely scrap it. Let's move on. It's a very fundamental theoretical basis that has no practical application. I'd look at this instead, right? This is a pie of participation. I'm very aware that youth participation needs to be molded into the location, the regional sort of location, and sort of the nuances there. And so these are the different sort of elements here of participation, if you'd like, the different levels of participation. And obviously, I'd encourage you to look at one, two, pretty much one and two, but one, two, three, and four. You do get, so we currently have, and trust me, I've experienced it myself, elements of youth participation that claim to be youth led and end up being like here, number 6, tokenism. Tokenism, I'll say something, young people know when they're being taken as tokens, when it's tokenism. Young people know it straight away, and it puts them off from engaging with youth participation in the future. Okay, young people can tell when it's tokenistic. What we're aiming for here is meaningful participation, where young people, where it's perfect, in a perfect situation, it's young people initiated and directed. It's number 2. This is the step when young people initiate and direct a project or a program, and adults are involved in a supportive role. Okay, if you're looking for youth-led participation, that is the one we're looking for. But we also know that in some situations that is not applicable, especially when there are certain topics that you think that are particularly sensitive, or require much more logistical sort of heavyweight, and young people are in full-time education. Young people initiated shared decisions with adults. So in Young Manchester, and this pie has come from lots of consultations with Young Manchester, the charity I'm on the board of trustees for. I am currently co-deputy chair on the board of trustees with an adult, and I think we also now have a co-chair with a young co-chair with an adult, and I think that's a perfect example of young people initiated shared decisions with adults. A lot of the enthusiasm of the different ideas come from us about how we can shape Manchester to be there as to fund youth services in an effective way, in an effective manner, and to innovate. And the adults are also there to share those decisions and provide their experience too. And what you have there is an incredible relationship, which Young Manchester as a charity has really invested in. So that's, I think, a perfect example of number 1 is Young Manchester. I'm a co-deputy chair with an adult, and we share decision-making power. So this is sort of the pie of political participation. I'd really encourage you to stay with number 1 and number 2. All the rest of them are problematic in their different senses. It goes without saying, please, manipulation, decoration, and tokenism are some of the worst things that could put off young people for life in terms of political participation. And that is what we were at pre-2017, I would say, 2017, 2018. And as a sector, the youth sector has sort of moved on into sort of the young people initiated shared decisions with adults through having young people in sort of leadership positions, which is fantastic. And I'd really encourage to incorporate that practice with local councils too. And this is sort of my idea of sort of sustained engagement. It's really important to know that sustained engagement is one of the most important things to engaging young people. Yes, we can, like we talked about it before, there are strategies to engage them on that initial level, but please make sure they're incorporated throughout the process. And actually, the best youth engagement strategies involve young people designing them themselves. Okay, I think it's often incredible to look back and go, how can a young person actually uh, design this process with us, or completely design this process? Because once again, going back to the basic fundamentals of youth participation, they know they know what they want, and they know how they can help. So please listen to them in terms of formulating that process. They should be involved in consultation, of course, but please don't consult them once a decision has been made. Okay, I've been in the room so many times where I've been given, Dan, this is sort of a policy, I've literally been given bills that have gone, okay, we're putting this into the house like in like a few weeks time, go. And I'm like, wait, actually, do we have any room here to edit? What's happening here? And they're going, oh no, we just thought we'd run it by you. And it's like, seriously, guys, like that isn't consultation. Consultation is having them in the room from day one and keeping them engaged. Should be involved in the policy formation and the delivery. And it's in the delivery, which can often be a fantastic sort of continuing cycle of young people seeing that you've been effective in youth engagement, and then being the next generation to come along and support. Stuff like the Bank of England Youth Forum, which I was part of, is a fantastic example of this. Not all youth forums with the current government or current sort of devolved bodies are fantastic at it, and actually young people know which ones aren't and which are. If we start to see that there's different impacts coming out of it, that our actions are having consequences, positive impacts, we're going to get engaged with that body. So the Bank of England Youth Forum is a fantastic example of sort of positive delivery there. And remember, throughout sort of meaningful engagement, although it is most effective when properly funded, and one of the 90% of my work at the minute is talking to people about, can we get more funding for youth participation? It doesn't have to be expensive. Youth politics, I'll be really transparent with you, runs on £10,000 a year. We are a group of volunteers, and I know we're a group of volunteers, but we genuinely, we try and make sure that participation is very low cost in nature, and it can be. And if actually you're spending millions and millions and millions on youth participation, think, actually, can we innovate here? Are there ways that we can do it? What I'm basically saying is, sadly, it's not an excuse to not engage young people if it's purely down to cost. There are definitely ways of engaging with young people which are low cost in nature. And I know I spoke at the party conferences this year, and I spoke and talked to local councillors in one of the big panel events, and it was the thing that kept coming back. And I know that there's a lot of work we can do on that, and I know it's one of the biggest concerns is, actually, if we only have a certain amount of money, because obviously it's often a devolved sort of issue, how can we, would we rather put this money in different directions? And actually what I'm trying to put forward across is, there are ways of engaging with young people that are extremely cheap, if not free. And please, let's utilize it. I've sort of talked about young people knowing when they're being ticked for a box. Meaningful participation is super important for sustained youth engagement. And like we said, we all benefit from meaningful youth participation. A great case study of this on a local level is one of my friends, Northern activist Liv Clark. And we were sort of, there was an issue in Manchester of transport being super expensive and young people not actually being, it was a local issue of, young people not being able to access a lot of the resources in the city centre, or sort of, and a basic thing of funding local businesses, right, which is geared for young people. And so Liv met with Andy Burnham and said, Andy, can you give us a free pass, 16 to 25-year-olds, right? We need a free pass. And she got it done. And it's had incredible local and regional impact, improving social mobility, increasing sort of investments in businesses that are geared towards young people, making sure that young people can access those venues, so that they can fully participate in the likes of political processes and accessing education, etc., etc. So that was a brilliant example of a young person pushing for change. And granted, Andy is incredible at listening to these sort of issues, and we need more politicians who are able to listen to the issues from the young people put forward. So massive sort of kudos to him for doing that. But I think that was a fantastic example there of a young person seeing an issue, coming up with a solution, and it being enacted. And I really hope that we can see that more on a national scale. Fantastic. And then finally, before we sort of go into a Q&A and sort of bigger stuff on the chat, We'll go into getting young people to stand. I think this is going to be a really popular sort of discussion here. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can encourage more young people to stand. I'm going to come up with three fundamental things which I think can be done better. And I'd love you to sort of put forward as counsellors and people with experience in this sort of area, your thoughts and how we can collectively do better. We all know what the issues are in terms of, we all know the stats are appalling in terms of young people standing. It's getting better. It's getting better, but we've got a long way to go. And instead of throwing stats at you, I wanted to throw you something. I did a bit of a consultation with young people in our network, and these are the quotes I got back. So why are young people not putting? I asked the question, why have you not stood as a counsellor, right? And these are the questions I got back. It sounds interesting, but I just don't know what a counsellor does. Are we even allowed to stand? I just don't have time. I do not have anything worth saying. How would I get started? And someone else could do a better job for sure. Okay, those are sort of those are the responses that really stuck out to me, and they sort of represented a large proportion of the responses there. And again, I'd really encourage you to sort of consult your networks and young people themselves as to why they're not standing, and there might be a more local argument there. And then once we know why they're not standing, we can really hone in on sort of solutions to that. I mean, I'd really encourage you, just from these answers, you can see that none of them are saying they really, really wouldn't, apart from potentially, I do not know anything worth saying. I don't have anything worth saying. In all of them, there's a potential that they could stand. All of them, right? All of them have a potential there to stand. It sounds interesting, but I don't know what a counsellor does. Let's tell you what a counsellor does, and it does sound interesting. Let's get you to stand. Are we even allowed to stand? Yes, you are. Let's go for it. I don't have anything worth saying. Yes, you do. Let's go for it. How would I get started? This is how you get started. Let's go. Someone else could do a better job for sure. Well, actually, there are these issues in the local area that we don't have a solution to. We'd love to incorporate your voice into this and figure out a solution. Come and join us. There you go. They're not all saying they don't want to stand. They're all saying that there are certain hesitations that they have to standing, which we can overcome. And these are how we can overcome them. Number one, with local councillors, demystifying the role itself. We need to make sure we make it, and this doesn't just apply to young people, but I think in particular young people. What is the job of a local councillor? You know, can we summarize it in one sentence? Can we have an elevator pitch for what your role is? And if we can do that, if we can demystify the process, that would be fantastic. We all know that one of the greatest tools certain demographics use in the political process is making it seem really exclusive and using very complicated language. One of my roles in sort of this in this job as sort of a chair of a youth-led organization is trying to punch that wall down and saying, no, look, you know, I won't single any figures out, but this person might stand at a dispatch box as the leader of the House and Commons and use very complicated language when in reality all he is saying is this, and trying to just communicate very, very, succinctly what they're putting forward. And I think that we can use that same methodology with demystifying the role of councillors. And there are different methodologies to doing that. Number one is, again, like I talked about, social media is fantastic for this. And I'd really encourage you, if you're going to use social media for any purpose, it's demystifying the role of a counsellor and showing young people what they do. That could be through yourselves, through just doing a day with, just taking videos of your work, just making it really accessible. There are loads of young counsellors. There are some in particular I'd recommend. Joe Porter is a fantastic local Conservative councillor. Then we've got Mette Coburn, who's one in London, in Hackney, and they're fantastic examples. And there's many more which I'd encourage you looking at, of young people in particular, but there are lots of adults who do so too. Demystifying the role of a counsellor through social media. Please provide shadowing opportunities. This is again a fantastic example of just being a really simple step, shadowing for a day, for a week, that young people will take the opportunity to do so. If you go into schools and you talk about a role, if you talk to young people you know about a role and say, come with me on the campaign trail for a day, or come with me to these meetings, okay, it's one of the most effective ways of engaging young people because they can see the role firsthand and they can go, I can do that too. And actually one of the best forms of shadowing isn't really shadowing. There was one day a year, and it's stopped now sadly because we haven't got funding for it, but it was one of the most incredible experiences where we flip the process, right? Where we go, okay, you're going to chair this meeting as a young person for a day. You're going to be taking my role for a day, giving them the power for a day. And I think it takes a lot, but you would be so surprised by the abilities of young people when you give them the spotlight. So genuinely, give it a go. If you say you're doing my role for a day, chair this meeting, okay, as part of the shadowing program, it will make the world difference. It'll give them the confidence to then push forward and pursue a role, fingers crossed. And like I said before, please, please, please don't neglect any young councillors you have at the minute or young people who are currently engaged. They will be your biggest asset. In youth-led sort of movements, young people themselves are really pushing forward. Give them the training, give them engagement, give them the resources, and really spotlight their work. Two, resources. This can be tough because there aren't enough out there, and I'm going to really try and work with the NALC. They've already got quite a few good stuff up to try and create some more. But there are some brilliant ones from British Youth Council, Youth Politics. We try and put some more out, but we're going to try and do even more. And My Life, My Say, and Shout Out UK about sort of what it means to be a young councillor. Digital resources, if we're going to do them, let's keep them bright, let's keep them snappy. But more importantly, youth politics has been going to schools and colleges, and that seems to be the best outlet still, because that's where young people are. It's a fantastic way of going in, but try and be engaging in sort of how you reach out. And honestly, schools love to hear from local councillors and MPs and the rest of it. So engaging with them on that level and provide them with resources to tell them about what the role of the councillor is. And if you do so, please do so in such an accessible way that makes it feel like they can do it, because they can. We all know they can. They just need that encouragement. And lastly, collaborate with organisations. There are resources out there. And if you are interested, please do get in touch after this session. I can point you in the direction of some good resources that we can sort of incorporate into youth engagement. And genuinely, it sounds really cliche, but it's the most powerful thing I think you can do is encouragement, right? I have had mentors who have genuinely just through providing me with the encouragement and enthusiasm to make a change, change my life. They genuinely have. And like I said before, a few of them have been mentors who were counsellors. I remember my first ever campaigning session on the doorstep. I was 14 years old, and I was at my local library, and there was 4 people who showed up in rainy Manchester. It was pouring down. The party who I am a supporter of had just lost an election, and so we very sort of not the best moods, and we thought, okay, let's try. I wanted to go and try and spur the crowd, but I didn't know what to do much. And there were 4 people who showed up by the library that morning, that Saturday morning, and one of them was a local councillor, been local councillor for about 40 years, like a long time. And he took my hand and he showed me the ropes of door knocking and canvassing, and he spent a whole afternoon teaching me how to canvass and to talk to people on the doorstep. And I remember that so specifically because it gave me the confidence to do so, and it sort of did what we were talking about before, punched the wall down between demystify the process of how a councillor sort of interacts with people on the doorstep, and showing them that they could do it. And that was a form of shadowing, which I don't think I appreciated enough at the time. And like we said before, when we go back to sort of the comments that I spotlighted beforehand, turn these into you cans. I think you probably saw beforehand how I did it, and I'd really hopefully encourage you to do the same. Are you even allowed to stand? Yes, you are. Here's the resources. Let's go. I don't have anything worth saying. What makes you say that? What issues are you passionate about? One of the greatest youth engagement strategies to use is, if people aren't particular about if people have in their heads an idea, which they tend to do, of what politics is finding the issue they're passionate about. And this really works well with young people, finding the issue they're passionate about, and that people are always passionate about something, and relating it to the political process and to local government. And as sort of people who are so passionate about local government, we know that sort of involves the majority of things. So for example, I went into a school in Moss Side talking about sort of giving our talk about youth engagement, and someone mentioned, and someone was just really out of touch with, you could just tell wasn't engaging. And I got him to stand up. I said, "What are you interested in?" And he said, "Football." And I said, "Okay, are you telling me football isn't political?" He says, "Actually, there is a topic I'm passionate about, which is racism in football. Like, that is something." I was like, there we go. That's incredible. And we worked with them to try and create give them the basics of running a campaign and gave them resources to work with local policymakers and a local campaign that was working on tackling racism in football. And I thought that was extraordinary. And that's a fantastic way of linking issues and topics that young people are passionate about, linking that to the work of local governments. And that is how you engage young people ultimately. So please, let's turn the don'ts into you cans. And that is where you come in. You play a fundamental role in encouraging and facilitating that participation. And finally, sort of offering mentorship, like we talked about before. We talked about shadowing there, but mentorship, again, plays a key role there in sort of demystifying the process. So I know I've talked so much about it. There's sort of, that's the majority of the content. We've sort of covered there sort of the main strategies for engaging young people themselves. We talked about sort of trying to reach out through locations, talk about technology and use technology, collaboration with other organizations, and how you can fundamentally sort of engage young people on a grassroots level. And there's sort of the importance there of meaningful participation as absolutely being critical to youth engagement. It's a process. It's not a one-off event. And if you need support within that process, do get in touch. We do a lot of consultancy work, and also can put you in touch with fantastic organizations that do too. And then finally, getting young people to stand. It just goes down to the three fundamentals. We all know what they are in terms of it's not difficult. We just need to throw more effort into it. Demystifying the process. Let's engage through resources and educate, and let's encourage young people to stand. Those are three things we can do right now that can genuinely get more young people involved in politics, and fingers crossed change the landscape in this country of young people participating on a local level. I've thrown my contact details there. Please do get in touch if you'd like to find out any more information or anything about our work. Be very, very happy to chat. Something I'm massively passionate about, hopefully, as you can tell. And I know there's a lot more work to do, but thank you so much for your initial sort of engagement with this. We really appreciate it. And yeah, you really can change a young person's life through doing this. I've seen it, I've experienced it. And I really hope that you've taken something out of this session that you can take forward in the future. Brilliant. Well, that's me done. I think we've got about 5-6 minutes. What would be useful? Would it be running through, I'll run through these. If they've got any questions, do throw them in. I'll put in a few comments, but thanks so much for the feedback already. Really appreciate it. Let's go into a few questions, shall I, for 5 minutes? Thank you so much. Does anyone have any? Let me stop sharing the screen. There we go. That's much easier. I hope that was useful. Does anyone have any questions? Maybe you can speak out with the mic. That'd be fun. Maybe if you raise your hand, that. Graham, yeah.
Hi, Dan. A problem that we've got, there's a lot of willingness in the council and there's a desire to involve young people. But as came up on the chat, we're a kind of self-selecting demographic. I'm one of the youngest people on the council. There's probably 4 people younger than me. And while I've in here, I don't think I'm old. If I turn up at a youth engagement, they're either going to go, what is he trying to do? Or just switch off altogether. We need some sort of intermediary to get things kicked off. Have you got any suggestions?
Yeah, fantastic point. Thank you so much. And often it's what we hear a lot about is what happens if we don't have any young people currently on the council to sort of kickstart that work? And all councils have started somewhere, and all good practices have started somewhere. The one thing I'd definitely say is get in touch with youth organizations. Youth organizations, if you're looking for intermediaries, they are fantastic. Whether that's through us, Youth Politics, we've got outlets across the country, or sort of local youth councils who can kickstart some work off. They're often regional ones who then look forward inwards more regionally. So I think you've got a few options. First one is sort of looking at your local young people. If you've got any local young people already engaged and can act as that intermediary, fantastic. Next step, if you don't have that, looking at local organizations. If they don't, you've got the likes, like I said, British Youth Council. Again, get in touch if you'd like me to. Where's your local area, Graham?
Trowbridge, Wiltshire.
Yeah. Wiltshire. Okay, so I will try and hunt some out for you after the session, Graham. If there are any youth organizations who can act as an intermediary, because youth organizations are often fantastic at that. But then if you can't do that, please don't underestimate sort of your own agency there. Genuinely, and I know I've talked a lot about getting young people to engage young people, but I know that that's not always the situation. If you're passionate about engagement and you're passionate about young people getting involved in politics, there are definitely ways that adults can engage, and we're going to try and create some resources just in the upcoming week of adults being able to do that. It comes down to the fundamentals of what we talked about before, going to areas where young people currently are. Often we make that fundamental mistake of getting young people to come to us, go to the areas that they feel safe in being and expressing their political views, and expressing their views, being really encouraging and having the correct resources to go in. And again, hopefully I'll distribute some links maybe after the session for that. Sorry, Graham, was that helpful at all?
Yeah, absolutely. We're at a position. Any suggestion is brilliant.
Amazing. Thank you genuinely. Thank you for the encouragement to kickstart that process, because I know it's hard when there's nothing to work on. But yeah, fantastic. Any other sort of questions? Just if you raise a hand, hopefully I can see. If not, I think we're start employing young people. That's a fantastic point, May. Tony, did you have a question?
Yeah, I come from an area where the youth club's been closed. We've got plenty of pubs and gambling places. We're a seaside town, but no natural places for young people to meet up. The local bus shelter, skate park. That's about it. Ideas of how to engage, when you've got nowhere to start.
Yeah, and like I mentioned in the speech, is one of the so I gave a talk in sort of 11 youth centres 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago. I wanted to go back and do the same ones, and only 3 were still there. And for me, that was heartbreaking. And I think it is a key issue that young people, those spaces have gone down. I genuinely, please don't underestimate the agency of and the ability of going into schools. That it genuinely does.
Yeah.
It's a big thing for us. People often forget, where are young people spending most of their time? They're
Yeah,
spending.
I'm a member of my local primary academy
Fantastic.
council,
Well,
but that's another thing. Our local secondary school was closed down.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where I've got difficulties,
Yeah. And I guess it's using that and trying to turn it into somewhere and trying to rebrand it again. It's hard because you don't have that sort of area to engage the young people, but I think you can still turn it around. I think if you had the primary school, sounds like a great place. If you're able to turn that around, that's still a safe space for young people to interact, and it's a place in the community young people will know, because chances are, I'm guessing, Tony, that young people have gone through that primary school. I'm guessing there'll be quite a few who, I don't know how long it's been there, who have attended the primary school, so they'll know it.
I signed a passport form for somebody
Yeah, exactly.
who I saw almost as a babe in arms.
Yeah, so there you go. That's a space that young people know and could be aware of, and hopefully be able to express their feelings and their emotions and their views. I think the location thing is a really important one, but try not to put too much emphasis on it. I think it's genuinely just having a space where people where it's safe for young people to express their views. But it sounds like the primary school could be an option there, Tony.
Yeah, I say truly do believe, and it's a case of we've got to go to them.
Yeah.
Rather than expect them to come into the chamber or whatever. But it's how do I get to them? That's the big. There we go. Thanks for your help.
No problem. Right, I'm getting the notice to close up shop, sadly. But I'll throw my email once more into the chat for everyone. If there are any more follow-up sort of questions, I'm more than happy to sort of set up a meeting at some point. Anything to distract me from my dissertation is much appreciated. So yeah, please do forward across any messages. That'd be much appreciated. And any feedback from talk. But I hope that's been useful in an hour. This could go on for absolute hours, but I really hope that was useful in some ways and gave some practical steps to moving forward, and hopefully the encouragement and enthusiasm to do so. Like I said, you can change sort of young people's lives. You definitely change young people's lives with it. So yeah, please don't be discouraged if there are more barriers in the way, because it can happen and it will happen. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.